Cool. We are officially live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chiropractic Compass podcast brought to you by the legendary Chiropractor online community. I'm your host, Johnny Reuter, and tonight is a super special night for me personally and for all of chiropractic students and all of chiropractic doctors watching this tonight and watching this on replay in the future. So please stay tuned with us. Be sure that you are engaging with all of the content and everything that we are doing. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please be sure to do that as well. So tonight we have the special opportunity to sit down with Dr. David Fletcher. He is a chiropractor out in Toronto, Canada, and he is the owner and CEO of CLA, which is Chiropractic Leadership Alliance, and they create and manage all of the equipment that allows us to see incredible things and insight into the body and understand what is going on actually, and gives us those objective measures, which we will get into. But I want to give Dr. David and Dr. David Fletcher the floor here to really introduce himself, share his accolades, and share a little bit more about who he is and where he comes from. Go ahead, Doc.
Hey, thanks, Johnny. Well, listen, it's always a treat to be invited to a podcast and to have a moment to catch up with, as I was talking about in the green room here, a rising star as it comes up. I've always had an enjoyable fascination with podcasting, with media, and ways we get the message out there. And so I just have to continuously applaud anybody who's taking those extra steps. And it reminds me of the concept that BJ always used to talk about, which was, never forget to advertise. And what he was meaning there was, yeah, sure, it's great for business and everything else, but chiropractic is a young profession. I mean, we're incredibly young, we're incredibly dynamic, and we can't keep it to ourselves. And so, his vision was always one of having an outreach experience, which is, why he started the radio station WOC. And I was mentioning just briefly to you that I was one of the original sponsors of the Chiropractic Philanthropist with Ed Osborne on it. And, it really was it has become or is still the premier podcasting experience within chiropractic. And so I couldn't wait to have a chance to have a conversation with this wonderful next opportunity.
Wow. That means a lot to me, Doc. That really does. I want to express to you how big of a fan I am of yours, how big of a fan I am of Dr. Ed Osborne's, and to put those two together. And really, you just taught me that you were you helped him out, and I was like, that is amazing to me. I mean, the world is a small world, but it's also, the chiropractic community is abundant. And I really appreciate people like you. So, Doc, please share a little bit more of how you got into chiropractic. Why chiropractic for you? Really, what drew you, or what about the profession drew you in, rather, to chiropractic?
Well, I think that many of our sort of vintage chiropractors had chiropractic experiences as they were, going through their own health issues and otherwise. And I really did as well. I was a smart kid, played a lot of sports, and was, sort of half in the sports world, half in the academic world. And I started to develop this really unmanageable asthmatic response. And, prior to that, just as a kid, I grew up in a central Canadian city called Winnipeg. They actually had spinal screenings in the public schools that were hosted by chiropractors. And the chiropractors would go in and do posture checks. And, if there was a detected scoliotic curve or something, they would then make a recommendation. And so I guess I was developing a bit of a curvature. And so we went in and I was checked. And one of the things that came up was that I needed to have some ongoing care to try and resolve this curvature. I think I lasted about 6 visits. I didn't really want to go, and it was more like, ugh. Anyhow, that was my early introduction to chiropractic. Nothing wrong with it. It just didn't seem that I needed to want to go there. I wanted to play, instead of going in there. Yep. And there was nothing really holding us to that point, because it was sort of like, well, there's some structure there that needs to be managed. Okay, well, we'll get to it. Anyhow, you fast forward a few years, and I started to develop unmanageable asthma, hospitalized, taking really awful drugs and whatever else. And the short version of this story is that we were going to my uncle's farm up north of Winnipeg for a Sunday dinner, and he's a dairy farmer. And he looks at my father, whose name was Charlie, and he says, "For God's sake, Charlie, get that boy to a chiropractor." And, because I was like struggling with my breathing. So anyhow, we went back down into Winnipeg, and my dad took me to the same chiropractor. And here's the story that I want to tell for those listening. When I was first introduced to chiropractic, it was introduced through this mechanical model. It was this idea of fixing a bent spine. And yet that same doctor who adjusted me, who then started to adjust me, not care for my spine, was trained himself by BJ. So he had a choice when he was first looking at me to decide if he wanted to manage the scoliosis or manage the subluxation. And so when he turned on by adjusting me and adjusting my subluxations, by doing it the chiropractic way from there forward, my life changed. And so even though, I had attended a chiropractor in name, it wasn't until I was adjusted by a chiropractor by purpose that I started to understand the full value of it. And sort of the second story of that was, and I sort of said that I was a bit of a smart kid. So I started university when I was 16, and I was going through it and ended up in math programs. And one of the things they teach you in math is logic. It's a great attribute. And so when I was assessing my sort of, next steps in going in my academic career, it was honestly, I looked at what chiropractic offered. I looked at how logical it was. And I said, medicine has an illogical outcome. It just doesn't have a logic. It's almost like a faith. They look at us and they say, oh yeah, innate intelligence, subluxations, and they think we're some type of, vitalistic, comic book characters. And in truth, that's them. We're the logical ones. We have what it takes. We understand that there's nothing happenstance about staying well. It's logical that innate intelligence reorganizes at all times to the best of its ability, so long as there is no interference. So the logic is look for the interference. And, to me, that's what sort of guided my essence of looking within a chiropractic model. And it served me well, and hopefully served many people around me well during that time.
Absolutely. I can tell you that it has. I love that story. I love the fact that, the chiropractor who adjusted you had that pivotal moment, right, in his career and changed kind of the trajectory of your life as well from that, right? And he was like, here's how I'm going to treat this person, or here's how I'm going to tend to this spine differently than I would other people. And I think that really, if he didn't do that, I don't know where we would be without you, Doc.
Well, probably just fine, because there's lots of amazing chiropractors, but I feel that it was, and I'll say this with reverence. I didn't really learn chiropractic coming out of CMCC. I really learned how to be, a classmate. I really learned to love the people that were choosing chiropractic. I learned how to understand physiology and neurology and everything from a very basic perspective. Mm-hmm. But I didn't learn chiropractic until I started immersing myself in chiropractic with chiropractors,
Mm-hmm.
My community colleagues, going to conferences, going to seminars. And I was just a hungry guy. And we didn't have podcasts when I graduated. And so you had to congregate. And I think that was very strong. But I really know that there's so much ability to learn and to immerse yourself. Yet at the same time, I would encourage everybody to jump in and join, events as they come about, like you and I met at Mile High.
Yep.
And, I speak at, 30 to 35 weekends a year, that are going out there. So I'm invested in watching how these events really change chiropractors' lives. And I can tell you that, somewhere on your list of things to do, you should be engaging in a very inspiring, congregation of chiropractors several times a year. It's really worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say it's impactful not only to you, but what you can then bring back to your community, or if you're a student, back to your school, right? And I think that's really important to bring that fire home and start impacting those around you that weren't able to necessarily go or be there and be a part of the action. So I like that you said that, and I do want to encourage everybody, all students and especially students listening right now, to find events that resonate with you and go to them, just like Dr. Fletcher said. And I think it's an absolutely pivotal point, like we said about your adjustment. An event could be that for you, right? An event could really be that light bulb moment in your brain and in your chiropractic journey here. So with that being said, Doc, I want to jump through, just bullet list the topics, and then we're going to go back to the top, and we're going to dive right in, because I think this is going to be a fun conversation. I can't wait to get into it. But first, if you are watching this, like it, love it, share it, do whatever you have to do to spread the news that Dr. David Fletcher is on the Chiropractic Compass podcast. And also be sure to check out thelegendarychiropractor.com for all of your chiropractic needs. With that being said, the topics for tonight are going to be, we're talking about certainty, objective data, artificial intelligence, designs within research, power of the adjustment, CLA's specific role in the future of chiropractic, and I like this one, where the puck is going in chiropractic's future, because it's so, all of those are so important, and I can't wait to get started. So, Doc, without further ado, let's hop right into, and I kind of clumped these together, certainty and objective data, but you can break them apart and then put them together. It's up to you. But go ahead and talk to us about certainty. What do you mean about certainty in the chiropractic world?
Well, I think that number one, certainty defines your perspective. And there's really a lot of ways to tell whether you're certain or not. One of them is very simple. If you are attracting abundance into your life in terms of the path you are, you've developed an attachment to certainty that matters to you. It's purpose driven. People who struggle, whether it's in practice, in academics, or otherwise, are struggling not because they don't have the tools, they're struggling because there's a distraction there. And so I think that when we talk about certainty, it took me a while to learn this, but without sounding some type of alarmist reaction, what I have learned and what I am certain of is that there is a devastating effect on human health and potential when subluxations are in play. And so with that being my certainty, I understand the power of the adjustment. And as a result of that, when I give an adjustment, I have certain expectations that I'm going to hold myself accountable to and to hold the patient's opportunity accountable to as well. And what I mean by that is that that's my perspective, because I start with this free-flowing perspective of what a subluxation can and does do to a person. Now, somebody who has a similar perspective could have a different desired outcome, but still be on the same path. For instance, instead of having that as their passion play, they could say, low back pain is a devastating, impact on somebody's life and future. And they could absolutely live in a certain world that they chose chiropractic to manage to a back pain model. And I think we have to develop this tolerance around certainty. In my world, the sadness about the back pain model of certainty that I'm talking about is that it just leaves so much opportunity on the table. Meaning, yes, I understand the devastating effect of low back pain on somebody's, outlook on life. But I know that there's something far bigger than that. And I know that because I allowed myself to experience it. Mm-hmm. And so because I know that, I can take my message and deliver it with that certainty that I'm talking about. And from that point of certainty, that's where you then start to align yourself with the tools that define your certainty. And again, I'm bringing this distinction about, but if I'm looking for the devastating effects on human health and performance, I'm looking to the central neurology. I'm looking to the central nervous system, not the peripheral nervous system. I'm looking directly in this brain to body connectivity, and I'm looking at the tone of the central nervous system. And so that's my objective data. So that's why I'm searching for that. Now, somebody who is searching for the back pain model is going to have a different perspective. They may have certainty from MRIs that show, collapsing discs, or they may have more certainty in, certain ortho-neuro tests, which, by the way, don't work. But, at the end of the day, you can see that their objective data points are not wrong. They're just not complete, because at the end of the day, what does trump everything else is the value of the control of the central nervous system. So by choosing to look at a subluxated model and a subluxation-based model, you're really setting yourself up to be probably in the most objective world, because we're looking at what is you can't define without seeing function and feeling together and not look at the central nervous system. So by choosing to live in this subluxation centered vitalistic model, and it's neurovitalism and neovitalism, you have to really, really understand that you've chosen the very top or apex of what you can deliver. And then you need to deliver what you need to deliver, which is you need to learn how to define a subluxation, how to adjust a subluxation, and most importantly, understand, in a lifelong journey, the importance of being on your game. It's not a haphazard gig. And here's the what I mean sort of famous for, Johnny, with this, with this statement is that you get paid to the level that you operate and communicate with certainty. So at whatever, if you're wondering in school whether you're not attracting the right numbers of, intern patients, like clinic patients or otherwise, there's a gap in your certainty. At all levels, it's a universal law. Abundance follows and is directly related to certainty. So your choice, find something to be certain about, but it happens to be that if you're certain about chiropractic and through a subluxation center model, it's massively abundant. Like, you can't keep people away. Right. And as I'm rambling here, I'm sort of laughing because we ran huge clinics. Like you and I and Janice Hughes had a chance to connect up for some time in Mile High, and Janice was on the west part of the Toronto area, and I was just to the east of the center of the city in there. And while we were, sort of in these early year days of chiropractic in our careers, we were seeing massive numbers of people. Several hundred patients a day was normal, in this whole model, and we were doing the adjusting ourselves. And that wasn't because, we had a better way or something that was different, or there weren't as many chiropractors or whatever else. It was absolutely based on abundance. Mm-hmm. This principle that we could deliver it. And yeah, it was nice to get the payout, but it was more fun doing the job. And I will say this, that like attracts like. When I started out into the eastern suburbs of Toronto, which is in Pickering, there was myself and a couple of others scattered around. And when I left, Pickering hadn't grown up. I mean, it grew, but it didn't grow like to a massive city or anything else. But when I left, there were 13 chiropractors basically on the corner that I started my practice on. And that was fabulous. That was fabulous. In this block, there were 13 chiropractors. And it was fabulous because that was what we had established, was that chiropractic had become the cultural norm within this community because we started something big. Yeah. So anyhow, just a thought there.
I love it. What I like to do on this show is let you talk on the topic, and then what I like to do is try to recap it in my student mind, yeah. Right? And try to really relate it to chiropractic students and or young DCs out there who are just getting going and might lack that certainty, especially because I feel like those first early stages in practice are the most critical, where you should have certainty in order to get people into your door and adjust them and be able to provide care for them. And a lot of times it's the opposite of that, right? And so I really want to encourage people. I picked up on two statements that you said that were like, that just blew me away. And that was certainty defines purpose. And I think that is really, really true on many different levels. But it's so, when you were like, you know what, when you are attracting abundance, which will come into my next statement here, when you're attracting abundance into your life, that means you are certain about something. Whatever you are doing that you are attracting abundance into your life with, that is what you're certain on. And then you said certainty is directly related to abundance, and I couldn't agree more. It absolutely is. And like you said, it's what's going to not only make you the dollar, but it's also what's going to get your patients well, right? And if you want to live in the back pain model, that's totally fine. No one's against that, because we need chiropractors like that. But the subluxation-based model, like you talked about your chiropractor addressing your spine as, right? And really, it changed the entire dynamic of the intent and the purpose behind his adjustment. And I think that it could be that powerful and critical to young docs coming out of chiropractic school. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I agree completely. Listen, I hope you don't have profound certainty coming out of school.
Right.
There's still a lot to learn.
Yes.
Yeah, and I say that with the greatest respect. It would be a shame if you knew everything before you really had gotten into full-time practice, because the hallowed halls of these education centers really allow you to get a license and to get into the real world of where you're going to be practicing with real people, that are reaching in their pocket, putting their life energy in your hand, which is their money, and their trust in you for their health and and their family's health. And that's a whole other, educational experience and dynamic experience. So, if there's anything that I can say is go into practice as a hollow vessel. Go into there with just this emptiness rather than the sense of being full. Know that you've graduated so that you can get into this emptiness, which you will fill up so beautifully. Again, if you allow the right things to fill it up, which is based on that certainty and purpose.
Absolutely.
So just that's a good thought.
Yeah.
And chiropractic is exceedingly simple, and it's simple by design. Is that it's simple because we try not to outthink the thinker, is that we try to work with what we're given instead of trying to always be another layer of interference that's in there. And so, the complexities of chiropractic are there as they are in any health profession or any healing profession. But the elegance of chiropractic is that we've been able to boil down the complexities of all of these different iterations of physiology, of anatomy, of emotional tone and otherwise into a very, very precise and succinct act, which is the adjustment. Mm-hmm. And we need to show extreme reverence not to the people that brought it, because you guys are more engaged than even we are. But the truth of it is that we need to bring a reverence to this capacity, this uniqueness of chiropractic, which is about the simplicity of giving an adjustment to a primary subluxation. And when you do that, it happened to me, life's changed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said. Don't try to outthink the thinker. That's awesome. We work with the body, right? And we can't do that. So I really encourage people, and like you said, don't be certain. Go with emptiness into practice, because there's a plethora of things that you still don't know. And I like to say there are 1,000 things I do know, and about 100,000 or even more, millions and millions and billions of things that I don't know. Yep. And so it's like there's always more to learn, and that's why we do continuing education credits, because things are also always changing, right? So what you did 10 years ago isn't the same today, and what you're going to do 10 years from now isn't going to be the same today. So with that being said, let's go into objective data. I know we kind of talked about it with the subluxation tied in with the central nervous system and certainty, but what do we classify in chiropractic, or what should we be classifying in chiropractic as objective data? Because I think there's a big difference between what I just said there.
Well, what I think we have to go again, I said, the purpose-driven process is the subluxation. And so we have to define the subluxation. We could spend a week on that alone. But the truth of it is that the subluxation really, is manifesting, the changes that we detect and work with is the vertebral subluxation. And so we're looking at the three subsystems of the spine, which associate with the active component, which is muscle, the passive component, which is the bone, and the controlling component, which is your central neurology. And these all have to work in harmony with one another. And as a result of that, when there is a distortion in the processing of the signaling, and what I mean by that is that there is an overloaded circuit model, or there's this persistent disturbance within the control mechanism, the body is so wise that it has to protect itself. And so it evokes this reaction in the active system to say, get me out of Dodge, let me protect you. And that in turn pulls and distorts the passive system, which in turn now becomes a new normal. And that new normal then imprints into the control system. The wisdom of the neurology says something's askew here. Let me adapt to that. And so when we take a look at objective data that's affiliated with the subluxation, we can really look at all three of those subsystems and be determinant as to how they interact with it. So my passion and my direction and my contribution into the profession has really been mostly to associate primarily from what I would refer to as a nerve first approach. It's a cycle. So let me be clear here that this is not saying there's a hierarchical approach, because when you change neurology, you're going to change the active and passive components too. It's however you want to look, your perspective. If you're looking at the passive component, which is the bony skeleton, you're going to find distortions in neurology from that as well. So my contribution, though, has been to say, listen, at the end of the day, the overriding control and regulatory aspects of how we interface with our humanness and our emotions and everything is not through the spine as a primary, but it's through the nervous system. So this is when Dr. Kent and Dr. Gentempo and I, for many years, worked very, very closely together. Christopher being the academic he was, Patrick being the very, very capable and wise chiropractor in front of people, and myself, I was the one who was developing all the clinical protocols for what you now know as the Insight, at that time, subluxation station. Yeah. And what we're reframing it with is the Insight adaptation station. And so the joy we had of working together was that it allowed us to really transition people's thinking away from this very, very, almost antiquated perspective of trying to look locally to find the subluxation to looking at global impact. We knew it happened, but we didn't have the signals to look at. So, we developed surface EMG, we developed thermography, we developed range of motion, but the jewel has been, primarily heart rate variability, or HRV, which has allowed us to really look at the tone of the vagus nerve. And when we start to look at vagal tone, that's one of the most objective aspects of looking at the totality of the adaptability of that organism. And, by observing the interbeat intervals, or the very, very tight fractals within a beating heart, and looking at the interbeat interval timings down to the third decimal point, you can start to really look at variability. And this is right up my alley because I come from a math background. So I was like, give me more of this stuff. And so by understanding the interplay between the different frequencies that fire through the neurology of the sympathetic and parasympathetics, we can build a map as to through variability as to which is dominant, which is being suppressed. And we've many times see that people live in a dominant sympathetic state, not because of their dominant sympathetics, but because of their lowered responsiveness in the parasympathetics, meaning their vagal tone has become very, very, damaged, if you will. And that is directly related to how a subluxation interferes with this communication, not only locally, but pandemically throughout everything. And I think that what is so critical to if you leave with anything, there's two things I want to leave with the students here as a takeaway, is that number one, the nervous system is constantly learning. It never stops learning. And, the other thing is that we don't subluxate locally. We subluxate with every cell of our body. We don't ever have a local phenomenon. That's only what we're seeing. So when we take a look at objective data, we look at the signals that associate with this processing of brain-to-body communication. So we're looking at HRV, we're looking at EMG signals, looking at the amount of energy that somebody's expending to do a simple task like seating, and then looking at a deeper connectivity, which is related to the deepening problem, which is through thermography, of where you're looking at the sympathetic motors as they go to preganglionically, and postganglionically control the organs, glands, and blood vessels. So, when you build a neural profile of the subluxation through a central neural, complexity of objective data, you win. Mm-hmm. Like, you win. And what we spent a lot of time doing is taking very complex algorithms and objective data points and simplifying those down into a single score, so that from a reporting perspective, there could be a metric that a patient or a doctor or a clinician or a staff member could literally look and say, oh my goodness, they're moving towards a more salutogenic state, meaning they're more coherent, or they're in disarray and they're more, they're more chaotic, if you would, and in an entropic state. So that's why I love that, the youth of our profession especially is embracing the tools that we're giving them, but also the scores and the algorithms. The core score, which has really become this sort of phenomenon within chiropractic, is a single number scoring system that takes all the data I just talked about, the HRV, the EMG, and the thermals, consolidates it into a single score, and it gives a tracking reference point for the patient and or the clinician. So that's objective data as I see it.
I love it. I love it. And that's so amazing. And we'll talk about at the end how people can better get in touch with you, how better people,
Sure.
How can they get better in touch with CLA and what you guys are doing and following what you guys are doing and releasing for chiropractic, because as we just heard, it's amazing technology, and the fact that we have the ability and capability to measure somebody's nervous system within our chiropractic offices like this, to this extent, I think is unbelievable to the care that we're able to provide that patient. And then look at, numbers like the core score and say, hey, look, everything has decreased or increased, or, now we can start measuring and tracking and keeping goals and tabs on patients in a true manner and an objective manner, which I think is your ultimate goal, is to say, hey guys, chiropractic is objective. We just have to have the right tools in place to measure it, right? And I think you guys are right on the right track with that and doing a great job with it. And I think that's going to lead into taking all of this data,
you got it,
and picking out like how we get this one score. And I think it's going to lead into artificial intelligence. So talk to us a little bit about what that means to not only CLA, but also what this means to the future of chiropractic as we know it when it comes to technology.
Well, I think that the segue has been set, and it's almost perfect because when I took over CLA, which was coming up 8 or 9 years ago now, I had a number of different mandates because the original subluxation station was very, very successful in terms of getting signals and data. But technology evolves. So my very first iteration was to move it to a wireless platform so that it'd be more portable, more nimble, more current with the rest of it. The second was that we needed to get it into the cloud. And so what we did was we realized that cloud-based computing was certainly where the horsepower would allow us. If we could get more horsepower, we could get better signals. But here was the real thing. Johnny, what happened is that we knew that if chiropractic was going to move into the right direction forever, in other words, if we didn't have this anecdotal approach, it had to come through research, and it had to come through research through big data. And so 3 years ago, I was studying, I was looking at machine learning. I was getting involved very deeply into artificial intelligence and understanding a lot of the AI. And I was sort of ahead of the curve a lot in terms of where I saw things going. And the great thing about machine learning is that everything founded on big data means that with machine learning, you don't have to ask the question. More than anything, you let the data tell you what questions to ask. And this is how you build the tools with machine learning and artificial intelligence to not necessarily, change the way that the model is going to work. You wait for the model to tell you what's working. And so we started to collect all of these data points. And one of the great things about CLA is that it has thousands of doctors around the world using this technology, and we have taught them how to do a very standardized testing approach. And we also have a very controlled environment under which we watch the data to be either collected or not. And so we knew we had this massive amount of clinical data. We hold right now the largest tranche of clinical data that's ever been collected within a chiropractic model. So we know now that we're ready for research. And so, we're the darlings. If you want to talk about valuation, the company is worth way more because of its big data than it is from anything. And that wasn't meant to say that we're going to expand or anything else. We're here for chiropractic alone. And so, and it's nice to talk about success stories within chiropractic.
Absolutely.
And so, when we made this decision, now we're starting to say, well, how can we work with it? So we are engaging with data scientists right now, interestingly, through New Zealand School. New Zealand School has always been a favorite of mine. Not to mention Life hasn't been, or Sherman, or Life West. But I have a strong relationship with the research team, with Heidi Horvik and as well as Kelly Holt, and they have a data scientist, Imran Iqbal, who is absolutely the genius of all of these people working together. Is that we can sit down and start to say, wow, what would a neural network of computing data like this look like? And artificial intelligence, when you create the right tool, as I was saying, doesn't necessarily tell you what you're looking for. You sit back and say, what can I see in this? And this is a whole new world. This is the world of what's called PBRN, which is practice-based research networks, these neural networks as we're understanding them. And that means that instead of doing double-blinded studies, we're looking at evidence-informed strategies, which look at patient preferences, that look at best practices by the clinician, and look at scientific data. And what we're doing is that we're taking these clinical data points from HRV, from thermography, from EMG, looking at them through a subluxation lens. And we're putting these data points together, massive data points, like tens of millions of data points of what we've been able to hold on to. And we're feeding it into an algorithmic tool that is being designed to say, well, wouldn't it be nice, instead of trying to define whether EMG should be used to measure the subluxation, to say, look, when EMG is used and people have this experience and feel like this, wouldn't it be great if we could see if you changed the EMG and it changed how they feel and how they react? Mm-hmm. Let's look at that. Mm. And so all of a sudden, instead of saying, should we be using EMG, the answer should be, well, why wouldn't you use EMG? Or conversely, it's like, it was always a sham. It never did anything.
Right.
Well, we kind of know the opposite because we've been watching it. But the realities is that we're going to be able to do that with different strategic decision making. And you know what's going to happen is that we're going to be able to come up and not only describe what a good piece of objective data and a collection is all about, meaning, you're going to be able to go to your patient and say, you have a 78% chance of following through with this response because of the data we have. And if you're lower than that 78% response, we know we've got a problem in the way you're responding. Let's do something different, or let's do something more.
Right.
In other words, we're going to come from your data. And that's what AI tells us about. So sorry I got off on that, but it was kind of interesting.
No, it is interesting. I find that stuff absolutely fascinating. And a lot of people think that when they hear artificial intelligence, and this isn't me personally, but a lot of people, like a person of the public, when they think about artificial intelligence, I think a lot of times people relay it to philosophy or to privacy and to issues with facial recognition and stuff like that. And I wanna say that, like, it also has capabilities of changing the trajectory of the future of healthcare, how we deliver chiropractic care specifically. And also because of like what Life University is doing with the program QUID and gauging different healthcare points and where people are actually at mentally and understanding the psychology behind the decision making that they're having, and saying what you said, right? We're looking at the data and wondering and asking questions about the data, not going in expecting a specific result. And I think there's a huge difference in that. And I want to encourage people to really understand, like you were saying, you got passionate for a reason. And I think that the main purpose of artificial intelligence can be really, really beneficial to the future of society, and it can benefit a lot of people. And I think that I just had to break the ground on that one, or just call out the elephant in the room and say, look, guys, it's okay to talk about this stuff because it can really advance the future of specific professions, including chiropractic and what CLA is doing. Would you agree with that, Doc?
Yeah, and listen, I think you bring up a really good point on privacy and security and everything else. There's this malicious approach, especially like you said, with using AI to try and not do what I said, which is to try and look and take an upper hand. If you're going in from a purity perspective, which is to look at this purposeful outcome, which is to say, can we be better? And I sort of said that's what our driving force is in CLA, is to be innovative and to be better. then use the tools that occur at this time in our lives to better the world. And I think that the more we know about chiropractic, and this is my belief system, and I think it will be borne out. I think the more we learn about how chiropractic works, the more astounded we will all be at how unbelievable it is in restoring efficiency within the functioning systems, with restoring coherence within the processing nervous system. I don't think we truly understand, other than anecdotal outcomes, what the power of an adjustment really does. I think that it's going to stun everybody when we start to look at this data. New Zealand team just sent, I collaborated with them and got them equipment and things like that to do a program over in Pakistan, looking at very, 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 disturbed, and behavioral kids, young boys. And it was almost an interesting experience because it was completely masked as to any bias towards what chiropractic was or anything else. There was no bias in any of this. And although the data is still being washed and worked on and the rest of it, was speaking with the clinicians who were over there that were adjusting and doing the, gathering data, pre and post adjustment associated with it. They spent 6 weeks out in the remote, Pakistani communities. So the results that were coming back are really quite astounding. The people that have not interfaced with chiropractic but get it into their lives change. And I think that's what we have to understand why a little bit more. And here's the point about this AI, and then I'll close it down. It wasn't a type of adjustment. It was that they were being adjusted into their central nervous system. It was that there was an intent with a designed chiropractic model to release tension and build coherence. And as a result of that, the model is then gathering the data. And here's the really cool thing. And I said the nervous system learns. These models of AI learn as well. So they learn from the data you put in. And the more data you give it, the more changeable data you give it, the more input it comes out to say, keep doing it, or you're going to expect this more. So that's why we go to these remote places and try and find really unique areas of data collection.
Yeah, I think
so you can feed the model.
Yeah, that's great. And the more we start doing that, the more we can start building that data and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we can actually start drawing some conclusions from this stuff, like you were saying with the surface EMG, right? And start actually gathering what is actually taking place at the end, and saying now we have objective measures on care plans and, pain-based models, subluxation-based, and everything else. You know what I'm saying? Like, that to me is so powerful. And the fact that I am able to utilize the tools that you guys are providing and will be able to utilize the tools in my own practice someday it just astounds me to this day. The fact that I'm able to see how a nervous system actually functions in my chiropractic clinic, and talking about vagal tone and everything like that with kids all the way to people who are 106. It doesn't matter where you're at. It's like this is an incredible piece of data and a tool that we're able to use. And I want to bridge this in with the designs within research. I want to know more about what you mean by that, and how all of the things that we talked about previously so far, certainty, objective data, and AI, how does all of that rather go into the designs within research to give us what, stepping stones into the future of certainty in chiropractic?
Well, I think I sort of gave a nudge in that direction. I think that you're going to find that the, Monique Andrews and the Christy Kwans and the Kelly Holtz and the people that are on the cutting edge of the research as we know it, see that you can't really research properly using a double-blinded pathogenic approach. If you're studying salutogenesis, you really have to have a different style or design of research that's going to pull it in. You can look at giant epidemiological models, which I think are appropriate, and I think this big data is going to do it. But I touched on it. You really have to almost rethink where we're getting practitioner-based, client preference, scientific-based modeling in this evidence-informed triad, and that's where the PBRN comes in. So these practice-based research networks are not single case studies. Mm-hmm. They're providing data from their practice experiences. And if we can put a control mechanism in on those practice experiences, not so controlling, because you don't want to change the flavor of chiropractic. You don't want to say,
Right.
oh, they were all doing upper cervical work. You want to get this broad spectrum and say chiropractic works, so that epidemiologically you don't have to say, oh, the Palmer method was what did it, and you get this sort of localization. So what we can do with PBRN is get thousands of offices sharing their experiences through controlled tools, whether it be the instruments, and then we've got some really, really good SF36 hybrids, which are validated tools, which are going to bring the patient into the conversation. And that means that the patient is going to be able to track their experience of what they're feeling as well as what we're measuring. So we've got objective, subjective tool measurements, and that then is going to go into this big data mixing bowl. And then out of that, the data scientists are going to say, what should we be seeing coming out? And this is the design that's going to move the world, because we're not trying to figure out a drug that's going to kill people. We're trying to figure out an entire class of decisions that humans can make that are going to make their lives better. And this is where chiropractic falls on itself, is because of its simplicity. Chiropractic may just probably work better than anything we knew. It just may.
Right.
And I'm a chiropractor saying that, but gosh, we look at the data, but we also look at the outcomes, and they're spectacular.
Yeah.
It's something else.
It's unbelievable. And I think that I also want to mention that, we always talk about chiropractic being the best kept secret. And I think that with where society is pushing people nowadays with evidence-based and numbers-based and all of this, I really think what you guys are doing there and with all of this data is really going to put chiropractic's hat in the ring, right? And it's going to say, hey, look, chiropractic's an option, and here's why, right? It's not just this whole thing of it works just because it works, right? It's this thing of it works because we know that we know through data, through numbers, and through objective measures. And I love that you said that now you guys are trying to bring the patient into it with SF36s, and that's a whole nother conversation of like combining now objective and subjective data and saying, look, how do those relate to each other, right? What is the outcome the chiropractor is noticing and actually measuring? And then also, what is the outcome that the patient is stating that they are having throughout this experience and throughout their care? And so I really, really like what you said there. Let's talk about the power. I think we've talked about it a lot, but I don't know if we really nailed it on the head. I want to hear your truest words of like, what is the power of the adjustment? Because you see the numbers, you see the data coming in, and maybe you can't draw any rash conclusions at this time, but talk to us in your professional opinion about what is really the power of the adjustment.
Well, and I don't want to come across sort of Spockian here. I mean, it should be, we should be, as flowery and as dynamic as, as lighting life up. But the power is that you can look at wave formats that are discordant and that don't have any sense of coherence. And within moments, you're watching these dissipated wavelets really come to a coherent fashion. And, when you start to get this confluence of coherence happening, you start to see the power of removing interference so that there's, the intelligent design of these structures that is the human body is why we refer to it as innate intelligence. And so when you get to look at this reorganizational experience through these, which is guided through innate intelligence, it's freaking amazing. Like, I mean, it's something else to watch that. And it's not just deductive reasoning that says, hey, if we remove interference, the body has to be better. You can literally see it happening. Right. And, when you take a look at, I mean, listen, BJ was probably the most rigorous researcher that existed within chiropractic in those earliest days. And even now, I mean, he based everything that he adjusted upon the outcomes associated with his research. And he used the tools of his time to do that. And so he was, he introduced thermography because it was the tool of his time. And, from a clinical evaluation perspective, he spent his entire life trying to determine how to measure the mental impulse. And, so, we sit here with a heritage of very spectacular research and looking at the power of the adjustment. I would say that we can never dismiss the power of the adjustment by asking mothers. I think that some of the most important conversations about the power of an adjustment don't come from the patient, but come from those who are most concerned about the person, and that's many times a mother of a child. I think that speaking to a partner of a person who is writhing in pain or passing through illness is even more important than looking at those wavelets that I'm talking about. My dear friend Otto Janke published a really lovely case study that was picked up into a very nice journal. And, he was talking about taking a woman who was diagnosed with stage four breast cancer and working her through to where, using heart rate variability as the marker as to how the adjustments would change. And, through rigorous chiropractic care and other methodologies, but non-chemo based, she was able to restore herself back into a all clear basis from stage 4. That's unheard of. Mm-hmm. That's beyond powerful. I get a chance to work with really amazing researchers. One of my favorites is Yuri Gidron, who's right now, he is not a chiropractor. He's actually a psychoneuroimmunologist, and he is the chief of staff in Lille, France, but I think he's just moved over to Tel Aviv or Haifa. And he's sort of this genius of HRV. He looked at stage 4 colorectal cancer patients before they died, and he determined that watching a person's vagal tone, which is HRV, was far more indicative of their potential for resilience. And he didn't even know the word chiropractic at that time. And then he started to say that, you mean to tell me that chiropractors improve vagal tone, change people's HRV, and you guys aren't telling the world about it? That's his thesis. Let me do research with you guys. And so I've had some wonderful, relationships and that in non-chiropractic research worlds because they get it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to share this one stupid little story. I got involved with a really significant program, which was looking at ADD, ADHD children, and it was being developed and monitored by the chief of psychiatry in Mass General, Boston Mass General. And so they invited me into this sort of inner chamber of medicine, which was this big round table of all these stakeholders. And it included, pretty significant people in the medical side of things in terms of Boston Mass. And also there were some educators that were in there. So there was a real think tank that was going on, and they invited me to sit with them. And so I sat down, and this was the head. So sitting beside me at this end of the table was the chief of staff, chief of medicine, chief of staff, I think it was Peter something or other, in for Boston Mass. And we had a moment before it goes. And, I introduced myself as a chiropractor, and he was. And he looked at me and he said, "You guys are late to the game." He said, "We know what you guys do." He said, why aren't you in here more? Why are we having to invite you in here? Why are you late to the game with what you can deliver? And these guys who are really at the top of their game, they get it. Mm-hmm. They barriers that break down, I wouldn't say all of them, but there's times that the barriers break down and they see outcomes or they hear outcomes and they want to do it. And they're really good guys, good women. They don't really care about what label you put on it, whether it's medicine, chiropractic or anything. They just want to care about the patient with them. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why we all got into this game, was so that we could be better for people. And I think that the more we allow ourselves to be better chiropractors, the world's going to be a better place.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Doc. I really, really couldn't agree more. And with that being said, let's talk quickly about CLA's role in the future of chiropractic and where really the future of chiropractic is going. And I think we covered most of that in, talking about what CLA does, what we're going to be predicting, and how we're going to be measuring the future in chiropractic and what we can gain from the results that we actually supply people. with, and I love your explanation of the power of the adjustment, but I also want to pick your brain on the future of chiropractic. What does that look like for us? Is it a good thing?
It's a great thing. Well, it is and it isn't. It's a great thing if people get it. If we keep fighting amongst ourselves and trying to determine that, that the value of the lexicon of innate intelligence and subluxation is no longer valid, that the evidence-based faction is talking about us as heretics, that's not going to do anybody any good. So I think we have to I think that the future of the profession lies in us having blinders. As much as we want to be inclusive, you can't talk to a barking dog and have a rational conversation. You have to wait till they stop barking. And, the realities is that we've tried so hard to be inclusive, opened ourselves up to say just what we started at the beginning of this, saying, well, it's okay if you choose to have a back pain model, like go for it. But we're doing this, we're doing something that's equally as important and bigger. So they don't see it that way. So the future of the profession is going to be gaining the confidence and certainty as we began this conversation to know that what we're saying is right. And I think that what an individual practitioner graduating today can do and work is bring that certainty to their adjustments and build really, really dynamic, big family practices. I think we have to really fight for the role of chiropractic in an asymptomatic model. I think we have to fight for the role of chiropractic in identifying performance KPIs in the human output. I think we have to, for everybody who's listening here, you should be so passionate about having a tool that gives you the certainty, that gives you the opportunity to invite a non-back pain patient into your care, and that allows you to give with confidence a care plan that extends for value that they may not even understand. That you understand the value of having a clear and coherent nervous system. They don't get it, but you give them enough time and they'll understand it through what they feel and what they experience. And so I think that the future of CLA is really to, we have this as our mission statement. We envision a world where every chiropractic office has an insight at the hub of their clinical decision making and the reporting. I know that's a mission that's almost impossible to achieve, but at the same time, it's what drives us. We want to be, wildly innovative. Our first core value is chiropractors first. We do not see ourselves moving outside of the profession. There's no need to. We're very satisfied to say chiropractic is where we should be and want to be. And so, I really see us as being a guiding light through our innovation, through our dedication, and through our alliances. My God, we've been around a long time. And you know what? We've done a good job. And, I've been with CLA for 20 years, but we've done a good job along the way of being more invitational than confrontational. We stand up for what we believe in, but we invite people to see us. And I see that growing. I see us nurturing the students. So I teach as a guest lecturer at New Zealand. I was just there. We have a very heavy donation program. You're at a school that has always benefited from a very, very, active donation model. Sherman, we support Life West. We support in the same way with donations of equipment, donations of expertise, donations of money. We want to. Is it good business practice? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me because it's good business practices because I feel good about it that we're bringing the youth into the conversations. So no, I think you'll see CLA as this quiet but unwavering voice that allows people to see that we mean what we say, and we're going to change the world. That's the bottom line.
Yes, absolutely, Doc. I don't even want to talk after that. I should have just ended the conversation just right there. But you're amazing, Dr. David Fletcher, and I really, really appreciate you being on the show tonight. I really appreciate all of you watching, engaging with us. And we have a couple comments we'll reply to after the show is over. And thank you for hitting those hearts. Whoever was hitting those hearts was going hard on them. So that was good for us. But they were liking what you were saying, Doc. So that was awesome. And so I just want to recap really quickly of have certainty in what you're doing as a chiropractor. And I like that you said, CLA is going to be this quiet voice that is always there, but is allowing chiropractors to really do what they do best, and that is adjust. And I really, really appreciate that. My hat is off to you all at CLA, and especially you, obviously, leading that mission of getting CLA into every single office and providing the objective measures for every single chiropractor to utilize. Because when it comes to research, we always turn to the next best thing, which is the medical research or something along those lines, and say, oh, we'll use this to prove them wrong, right? And we'll use their own journals and stuff. And there's no need, in my opinion, with technology and data collection that you guys are doing coming up in the down the pipeline. Like, there's no reason to do that anymore when we start getting those actual true numbers and measurements from how people actually respond to the chiropractic adjustment. And I also want to mention that I like what you said. We have to kind of put on the blinders and say, look, we're in this camp and we're going to fight for this camp, and it's okay, and it's okay to do that, because I think that I know that we are going to change the world one way or the other. And we want to be on the front of that. We want to be on the front lines of that. And so I really appreciate you being on the show, Doc. And how can people better get in touch with you, CLA? What are some things that people can really venture out and do to support you?
Oh, well, listening to a podcast like this is excellent. We thankfully gained the URL subluxation.com. So that's always been one of the treats that I have. So you can go to subluxation.com. We actually go under Insight CLA just because we wanted people to know we sold the Insight as well. So insightcla.com, subluxation.com, they all end up at the same place. We have if you go into the blog section, there's some great downloads that you can do. I really want everybody who's listening to become familiar with how we integrate communication and clinical practice. So I created a RED book, which is the red book. And RED is really the logical process of thinking about how we have reserve, we have energy drain, and then we have a deepening problem. And so if they're interested, they can just go to info@insightcla.com. And I would be more than happy if they just leave me an email through whatever they're doing there to send a red book or an ebook to them, and they'll get on the list, and then we'll just have a lot of fun staying in touch. I think that for students, many of the clinicians that are teaching the Insight in the schools aren't as familiar as even you are with how it works. Dust it off, get in there, scan people, start learning about looking at signal acquisitions. And finally, love your neighbor, man. I'm telling you, this is a world that needs a whole bunch of love. And who better than a chiropractor to have that? And my parting comment is to say something is this. Look, we're either right or we're wrong in chiropractic. In other words, we either had a really good idea and it was either right or it was wrong. I can tell you as a youthful people looking at this, and I feel youthful, but I have been around the block a few times. We are right. You know what I'm saying is that you may have that doubt, and we began this conversation about certainty. I can tell you from my perspective, and it isn't just my experience and everything else, but from my educated experience and my ability to spend way too many, years traveling this world, we are right. And you should take that to the bank.
Absolutely, Doc.
That I promise you.
Awesome. I don't think you can hear. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay, good. Awesome. Oh man, you like just hearing those words. That's amazing. I wrote that quote down. I'll watch this video over and over again. And if you're just joining us now, please be sure to watch the entirety of this video. And that's not for playthroughs. That's to learn and educate yourself on what the future of chiropractic really looks like. And sitting down and having the opportunity to sit down with a legend in chiropractic such as Dr. David Fletcher. I'm honored. I'm humbled, Doc, and I can't wait to see the future in chiropractic, what CLA is continually doing. And it's not when, it's right now. And I think that heading to subluxation.com, and it was info@cla.com, correct, Doc?
info at insightcla.com.
Insight CLA. Let me edit that for people.
Yep.
Insightcla.com. Perfect. And so head to that, and you can reach out or contact Dr. David or his team, rather, and they can send you a book on all of the clinical outcomes and everything like that. So, Doc, thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody watching or watching on replay, head to thelegendarychiropractor.com to get all of your chiropractic needs and questions answered. We are up and running, and this is my 53rd Facebook Live.
Nice.
And yes,
nice.
and we are actually, this is the last week of season 3 of the Chiropractic Compass podcast. So I am so grateful that you were on the show. You were able to be on this podcast, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service to the profession. And I know that you will keep working your butt off in order to leave this profession better than it was when you got into it. So I appreciate you, Doc. I really do.
Thanks, Johnny. And I appreciate you too. Let's make it a great world together.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Everybody have a wonderful night, and we are signing off. Thank you, guys.